Welcome, guys. Welcome to another episode of the Tom Kai on Blog podcast. Welcome, guys. Welcome. Today we are going to be looking at the Puff Daddy trial. The verdict was announced a couple of days ago, I think 2 or 3 days ago. And so we are going to be looking at the verdict in the P. Diddy, aka Puff Daddy, Sean Puff Daddy Combs trial. And we're going to be reacting to the verdict. Initially, before Puff Daddy was indicted, there have been this rumor circulating in the entertainment world among fans that Puff Daddy was engaged in some sexual deviance, that there was an organized crime, that whenever he hosted or organized a white party or Diddy parties, and annually in Miami, and a lot of people go there, celebrities, fans go there. He opened his home up to the public, and people go there to party, have a lot of fun. There was a rumor circulating generally that there were some sexual activities, deviance that uh, people engage in, fetish sex, and all of that. That artists were being, we had an issue about Justin Bieber visiting, we had an issue about Meek Mill, several artists that were being accused of having a sexual relationship with Diddy. So there have always been this information circulating uh, in the entertainment world and among the fan base of the hip hop community that Diddy was engaged in sexual activities with other male artists. Like I said, Justin Bieber, Meek Mill. There are several artists that have been named to be in a relationship with Puff Daddy. So this information have been circulating for years because Diddy have been a rap monger, uh, the owner of Barbara Records, working with BRG, the late notorious BRG, Mace, The Lux, all the top rappers that were on the record label of Barbara. So there have been different. Diddy have been a very successful businessman for a rack of ages and long years, and he diversified his business into a diverse. He started promoting. There was the liquor that he promotes, and that he got several enterprises, and he's a billionaire. So, with this information circulating in the public, a lot of press, a lot of media, 50 Cent talking about it, other people critiquing him. So the notion generally that Diddy was a bad individual he had been engaged in, he's a gay, he's engaged in sex with other artists, X, Y, and Z, until he was indicted last year, and then he willingly turned himself over to the authorities, and he has been in jail since then while going through the trial. But then, when the trial actually started, and the key witnesses, to be particular, his ex, uh, what's the artist name? Uh, his ex, because there are two key witnesses in this case. Two key witnesses. One, which is Jane Doe, which is unknown, and then his long-term ex. I've forgotten her name, but I'll get her name later. So when they took the stand and they started to narrate their story that they were being forced into this criminal cartel because it's a RICO case. A RICO case is initially it was intended, the RICO the RICO law that was intended to bring down the mafias, because the mafia is like an organized crime body. You have the head of the mafia, you have his deputy, you have the maid guards on the streets, the capo, all these authorities. So the mafia generally operated as an organized crime entity. But then, before, there was no law in place to adequately target the mafia and disassemble them and put them in jail until this law, which is called RICO, was uh, was legislated by the American Parliament, and then they used that law to really go against the mafia and dismantle the whole mafia empire. But then using the same law to target Diddy, and the West to target Diddy was not appropriate. It really never really matched the case. And the worst thing about the case is that Diddy was the only target in the case. All the others, cooperators and collaborators, were now had now been turned into witnesses and were testifying against Diddy in the case, and Diddy being the head of the organization, the only target. So those that are supposed to be under him have been, according to the allegation, have been participating in this organized crime. All those that he was influencing, giving instructions to, they used them now in the case to testify against Diddy, and which is the opposite. This is not how RICO cases work. Normally, RICO cases work is that you target the whole organization from the head to the least person in the organization. So the whole organization is targeted in a RICO case. But in this instance, the prosecution used the RICO case to target only Diddy, and then leaving all his accomplices, his alleged accomplices, to be witnesses against him in the case. And this is not how RICO cases work. So the government actually blundered in using RICO against Puff Daddy. That's my first observation, that RICO was not the appropriate tool to use to target Puff Daddy in the case. If the intent was to use RICO, it should have been then Casey is his ex, and Jane Doe and all the other witnesses that testify against him shouldn't have been used. They should have all been targeted as one organization, including Diddy, Casey, Gene, all those that testify against him should have been target of the RICO cases instead of using them as a witness against Diddy. So the government blunder, that was a very terrible blunder in using the RICO case. The second observation I have is that during the deliberations, because Casey was the first key witness, she was pregnant, and so they were using all her condition and situation to magnify her vulnerability in the eyes of the juror and to put pressure on the public opinion, all of that. She's pregnant, she's going through a trial, and all those things will impact the outcome of the case. But unfortunately, during the deliberations, she narrated her story that she was falsely engaged in sex trafficking because she wanted to please Diddy, and that was on several occasions that she were forced to engage in the freak of party. But then when the defense had a counterclaim to her, when the defense went to ask her questions, they unveiled that through all the text messages, she was always engaged in participating, organizing the free off, asking Diddy, when are we having a freak off? I'm missing you. I would like to engage in a freak off. Even with the incident where the video of the Continental Hotel where was so graphic. Diddy was beating her in the hallway, kicking her, and doing all the terrible things to her. Even with that video, after that incident, she also contacted Diddy and asked Diddy on when will be the next freak up. She's looking forward to participate in the next freak off. So imagine that very graphic video that we have all seen on the internet, whether it be Facebook or YouTube, where Diddy and Casey was at the Continental Hotel. She was trying to leave. In the lobby of the Continental Hotel, Diddy attacked her, slap her, kick her, and then drag her in the lobby of the Continental Hotel. After that incident, few weeks or months, Casey then contacted Diddy that she was willing to meet with him and she was looking forward to participating in another freak off. She's asking when will be the next freak off. So the case actually didn't show any cohesion that Casey was forced to participate in those freak off. That the Jane Doe individual was forced to participate in those cases. In the two key witnesses narration and the re-examination by the defense rather disclosed that their engagement and participation in a freak-off was willing, it was consensual. It was not out of cohesion that the quote-unquote sex trafficking and racketeering never really existed. Diddy never really forced them to participate in the freak-off. After the examination by the defense was done, it clearly exposed that they were willing participants. And remember, guys, the third observation is that the relationship between Puff Daddy and Casey lasted up to 11 years or above. The Jane Doe individual, I think, is 2 to 3 years. And currently, the last testimony in the court, Diddy was still paying her rent. The Jane Doe individual, Diddy still pays her rent. So she's still benefiting from Diddy while even going through the case. So you are in a long-term relationship with an individual you claim to be a sex trafficker that is engaged in racketeering, and he's coercing you to participate in all these weird and unwilling participate in all these sexual activities that you say you are not really interested in you, but you are being forced. Why didn't you leave? Why didn't you leave during the first year, the second year, the third year, up to 11 years? You have your differences, you break up, you come back together, differences, break up, confrontation, you break up, you come back together, but he's still fully responsible for you. He pay your apartment bills, he send you 10K, 30K, depending on what you need. There are a lot of pictures out there, Casey and Diddy out in the public. The public knows she's the official girlfriend because Kim Porter was the wife that had all the children, the late Kim Porter. So it doesn't really make sense. The accusation and the narration doesn't really come to par. It doesn't jive. So all these allegations that were made against Diddy were proven to be false. That the relationship was consensual and that Casey and Jane participated in the freak off willingly and they had all right to leave the relationship at any time, but they never did. My fourth observation is that the government should have approached this case as a domestic violence case, considering the toxicity of the relationship. Domestic violence could have been the most appropriate charge to give to Diddy, but considering Diddy being this rap monger, this billionaire individual, so the government saw domestic violence as a tap on the wrist and it was not worth it. So since he's a rich individual, he's popular, he's well known, he's a billionaire, so go they're attacking with racketeering, not taking into consideration whether racketeering will fit or not with the RICO case. So the government blunder, terribly blunder. But I strongly believe that the whole case with Casey and P. Diddy, as well as Jane Doe and all the others allegations that were levied against him, were basically a domestic violence case that were taking way above and beyond its level of accusation. So they went way above and beyond doing what they should not have done, accusing of sex trafficking and racketeering. That is not the charge that will fit. And then you targeting only Puff Daddy, leaving all the other participants or members of the organization and targeting only the head, using the other members as witnesses against him, giving them free ride and targeting Puff Daddy. So it didn't work. But we are going to go through two videos here. I think one from TMZ and one from, I think, Law and Crime or CNN, one of the news broadcasts. And you are going to see the verdict and different opinions that were shared. But that's my take from the Diddy case, that the Diddy case, the government blundered by using RICO to target Puff Daddy. Secondly, the government blunder because in the RICO case, the whole organization is targeted. Everyone is indicted in the case, as in the case of the mafia, the head of the mafia, the deputy, the couples, those guys on the streets, each and everyone have an indictment. But in the Diddy case, then they targeted only Diddy, they indicted only Diddy, but all the other members of the organization were used as witnesses against Diddy. So it never, from the onset of the case, it never matched. And there was too much uh, negative hype in the media that Diddy was this buku man or this Gina that everybody should be afraid of. He having sex with all the male people. He doing terrible things. Come to find out that even the freakers were not at Diddy parties. The freakers were very exclusive, very private, and those that participated in it, the male escorts, they already knew there were complete restriction on how it operated. So the media was totally wrong in blowing it out that Diddy is a terrible human being. He did X, Y, and Z. We can accept that the video from the Continental Hotel was terrible. I'm totally against the act of Diddy violating Casey, abusing her, beating her in the lobby. That video, I disagree with all the actions of Diddy. I think he came out and apologized on it. And later on, subsequently, he was indicted. But the government misused, the government blundered totally. A domestic violence case and you use it to turn it into a RICO case, it's a total blunder. But we are waiting for the sentencing of Diddy because let me read for what I have here for the verdict. The actual verdict of the case is the United States versus Sean Combs, aka Puff Daddy, P. Diddy, not guilty. Count 1, not guilty of racketeering and conspiracy. Count 2, not guilty, sex trafficking by force, fraud, or coercion. Count 3, guilty, transportation to engage in prostitution. Count 4, sex trafficking by force, fraud, or coercion, not guilty. Count 5, guilty, transportation to engage in prostitution. So Diddy was not guilty of 3 counts. 3 counts. If 3 counts are not guilty of sex trafficking by force, fraud, or coercion, not guilty of racketeering, conspiracy, and not guilty of sex trafficking, force, fraud, or coercion. And he was guilty of 2 counts. Guilty of count 3, transportation to engage in prostitution. Count 5, transportation to engage in prostitution. So he was held guilty of these 2 counts that has to do with transportation to engage in prostitution by moving from one state to another, transporting the escort from one state to another, organizing the figure at different hotels, at different venues in different states. So it's transportation to engage in prostitution. Those are the 2 counts he was held, we were found liable and guilty of. And these 2 counts each serve a maximum of 10 years. So a maximum of 10 years for count 3 and maximum of 10 years for count 5. So this is 20 years. But considering that Diddy had no prior criminal charges, and that secondly, he had been in jail for almost a year for the trial, that the second thing, considering this situation with Diddy, 1, he have no prior criminal charges. 2, he have been in jail going through the trial for almost a year. 3, he himself went to the authorities and submit himself to detention. He himself went there with a lawyer and submitted himself to the authority. So based on all these incidents with Diddy, he's in a best position to get a lesser conviction. They tell you he already been convicted, but the time period that he will be convicted for might be lesser than the 20 years maximum. It might be 5, it might be 6, 7, depending on what the judge decision is. But Diddy is in a better position to get a lesser charge considering his behavior, his attitude, no criminal record, being in jail for almost a year, submitting yourself to the authority, and negating the issue of he had been acquitted of this terrible crime that has to do with racketeering, conspiracy, and sex trafficking. So he is not really a danger to the public. He's not a danger to having maybe flat breaks. So considering all these instances with Diddy, I think my observation is that he might get a lesser trial. That's the first situation. The second issue is that the government have already lost, which is the United States versus Combs. The United States, in this case, the government have already lost the case. They have been defeated. The 3 critical and serious allegations Diddy were found not guilty of them, according to the 12 jurors. And so Diddy the charges he is guilty of, which is transportation to engage in prostitution, is a lesser charge. So he's not at risk to the public. He's not at risk to fleeing. He could be charged a lesser charge, spend some time in jail, and be on probation or be on house arrest or some kind of detention. There should be some arrangement made out of this. That's the first instance. But the second instance is, since the government have been defeated in this case, maybe the government will feel, considering we have already been defeated, but there's a maximum of 20 years. And so to get our get back and to get sentiment from the public, because not everybody is in agreement with the verdict, especially the male community, the female and the feminist community, the Me Too people, they are not in agreement with the verdict. So to gain some public opinion that the government never actually lose the case 100%, and so maybe they could increase the charges. There's a possibility. They could go for the maximum, maybe 10 years or maybe 20 years, considering they could go for the maximum. But the two charges that he's guilty of is a maximum of 10 years each, which is a maximum of 20 years. So considering that the government had lost, the government could retaliate somehow to gain public interest. So all these issues should be taken into consideration when a charge is made. When a charge comes out that did he have a lesser sentence, or he's under the house arrest, he's under maybe he gave him 2 years in jail, and then he is on probation for the remainder of his term. That is possible. It's also possible that the government will want to retaliate and to gain public interest as well. So all these issues should be taken into consideration on the term of the verdict in terms of the charge of transportation to engage in prostitution. So this is my take. This is my reaction on the daily case. But before we go through the video, I just want to make sure that we are live on Facebook, which we are. We are live on Facebook. We are live on Facebook. So we can go into the video now. Ben, on giving my reaction to the daily case, and that's my take. So far, the government blunder and they lost. And daily to daily lawyers, to daily defense and to his lawyer, giving credit to his lawyer, daily have a strong legal team as well. Because one of the daily lawyer is the lawyer from these what is rapper? The rap and another rapper were on the same legal charge. His lawyer won his case, and it was one of the lawyer on daily case also. So Diddy had a quack legal team representing him. He had all the money so he can get the best lawyer. So that's it. We are live on Facebook, my YouTube here. Let me check YouTube. I'm sure we should be live on YouTube. We should be live on YouTube. Let me see my YouTube channel here. Yeah, we are live on YouTube. So let's go. Let's go with the video. Let me share. Let me share my screen here. No, there's only TMZ. This is the first video we are going to share.
Was Combs' enterprise. So again, linking that enterprise to it. When we're dealing with the witness tampering, I don't think it was as strong. You're dealing with D-Rock and the messages to Mia. I don't think it was that strong. Also dealing with Jane and the recording that KK recorded Sean Combs and Jane having that conversation. The forced labor, I think it was probably one of the weakest counts dealing with the predicate acts. And again, that's dealing with Mia and the long hours that they work, but also having put Cassie working as a sex slave pretty much. When you're dealing with the drug distribution, I thought that was the strongest count of the predicate acts having to deal with racketeering conspiracy, because we know the common thread that narcotics was given to Cassie and to Jane on more than one occasion, and all you have to prove is one incident within the possession with intent to distribute. You have the personal assistant saying that they were asked also to bring narcotics to give it to Sean Combs so it can be delivered during the freak-offs. And even Brendan Paul even said that on one occasion, Sean Combs had him try out some narcotics, and just giving him the narcotics to try out is sufficient to meet that count.
Rena, what can you tell us about the reaction in the courtroom?
Well, Diane, we know that it has been very tense in that courtroom. It has been emotional. Combs yesterday, when there was a partial verdict, we saw him wiping tears from his eyes. He was slumped over in his chair. He was hugging his attorneys. Just a short time ago, a couple of minutes ago, we saw his family arrive back at the courthouse here. They have been here really every single day of this trial. Now, we are told that Combs was in the courtroom this morning for about 30 minutes. He was mostly reading a book, jotting down notes, and he spent most of the deliberations in a separate location. We are told, though, that everyone is making their way back to the courtroom. Lawyers from both sides, prosecutors are filling the front row of the courtroom. The judge and the jury are not inside at this point. Before this morning, though, Combs shared a moment with his family. He bowed his head. He led them in prayer. He said, "Bless this jury, bless my family." He told them to stay strong. They locked hands and they prayed. And he also hugged his defense attorney, Brian Steele, before heading to that separate location where he has been for most of these deliberations. So this is clearly a big moment. He's about to learn his fate that these 12 New Yorkers have decided for him.
Bernardo, one of the things the jury asked for in one of their several notes was to look again at Cassie's testimony about that 2016 hotel attack. That was the video of the attack was caught on surveillance of Sean Combs assaulting her, kicking her, dragging her through a hallway. And they were asking to see the testimony where she testified that she had was trying to escape one of those freak-offs when he beat her and dragged her back into that hotel room. Do you read the tea leaves there, or what does that tell you in general, that they wanted to see that testimony again? And how critical do you think that event and that video was in this case?
Let's be clear, Diane, but for that Intercontinental video, we wouldn't be here today. I can honestly say, having been a prosecutor for 16
I have to interrupt
years.
you. We're going to a special report with the network. Let's listen to Kira Phillips.
And good morning, everyone. I'm Kira Phillips. We're coming on the air because the jury has now reached a full verdict in the racketeering and sex trafficking trial of music mogul Sean Diddy Combs. Jurors had the court scrambling yesterday, you may remember, when they sent a note to the judge saying they had reached a partial verdict on 4 of the 5 counts, but they were stuck on the remaining racketeering conspiracy charge. The judge telling them to keep an open mind. Well, deliberation resumed this morning for a third day. The Combs trial has been going on for nearly 2 months. As you know, graphic testimony, disturbing sexually explicit images. And during yesterday's deliberations, the jury asked for a transcript of ex-girlfriend Cassie Ventura's testimony about the 2016 hotel attack that you're seeing here on your screen that was captured on surveillance video in that hotel. That video showing Combs kicking and dragging Cassie in a hallway. Cassie testified she was trying to escape one of those so-called freak-offs when Combs beat her and dragged her back into the room. The jury made up of 8 men and 4 women. Combs has pleaded not guilty to all the charges. Let's get right to our chief investigative correspondent, Aaron Katersky. He is outside the courthouse there in Lower Manhattan. Aaron, I understand now that Sean Combs has entered the courtroom.
Every day, the exit Sean Combs is now seated at the defense table, Kira, with his attorneys. Judge Arun Subramanian has just taken the bench, instructing everyone in the courtroom to maintain decorum when the verdict is reached. It comes after about 14 hours of deliberations over 3 days, and it comes after the jury became stuck on the top charge of racketeering conspiracy, saying they had reached a unanimous verdict on 4 of 5 counts, sex trafficking and transportation for the purposes of prostitution, but had become stuck when it came to the racketeering conspiracy charge. And it's a complicated charge because it required the jury to believe that Combs, if they were to convict, was the leader of a criminal enterprise who relied on his assistants and bodyguards and other employees to commit crimes with him. And there were 8 to choose from. The jury would have to find that Combs agreed to commit at least 2 of those 8 so-called predicate acts. But the judge at the time did not take a partial verdict. He instructed the jury to go back at it. It was too soon to give up. And here now, on the 3rd day of deliberations, after about 14 hours, Kira, the jury has reached a verdict.
And Aaron, I understand that, as I'm being told now, the jury is entering the courtroom. Give us a little bit of color from early this morning. Apparently, Sean Combs was allowed a moment with his family. They prayed together. Tell us about that, Aaron.
This was not the first time that Sean Combs has prayed in the courtroom. The judge was not on the bench. He asked the marshals for permission to speak with his family. There's an entire row in the gallery, the second row of the gallery reserved for Combs's family members, his mother, twin daughters and sons, all there, other family members in the courtroom as well. And he asked them to hold hands, bow their heads, and pray. And that's when Sean Combs asked for blessings for his family and also for the jury. That jury is now entering the courtroom, Kira.
And I'm told the jury is seated now. Brian Buckmeyer, our legal contributor, I want to bring you in on this. I'm going to have you comment on that in just a second. But let's talk about the RICO charge, the toughest charge here, but would bring the strongest penalty, right?
In a sense, yes. So the racketeering conspiracy, it does have a possibility of a life sentence. The reason why I say in a sense is because the sex trafficking by force, fraud, or coercion, that sentencing guideline has a minimum of 15 years to life. So life is a possibility whether or not RICO is met. But I think with the RICO, there's an added issue as well as to automatic forfeiture, because when you are convicted of a RICO conspiracy, the government isn't just looking to incarcerate an individual who participates, or in this case is allegedly the head of that racketeering conspiracy, but also to dismantle that conspiracy or that RICO from a financial standpoint. So all the stuff we heard about Sean Combs' homes and his enterprise and the bank accounts that were used for the sex trafficking and transportation to engage in prostitution, if convicted of racketeering conspiracy, that can also be dismantled or taken by the federal government.
And Brian, talk about some of the charges that were dropped. Is it being read right now? Okay, let's go right into the courtroom. Okay, all right. It is being read right now, I am told. Aaron, let's take it back to you as we are now hearing from the judge inside the courtroom.
Mm-hmm. So the jury, Kira, had to fill out this form, which lists the charges, proven, not proven, the predicate crimes, and whether Sean Combs is not guilty or guilty. On count 1, the racketeering conspiracy charge, Sean Combs has been found not guilty of racketeering conspiracy, perhaps the most complicated charge for the jury to understand. The count 1 had provided for a number of predicate acts, but the jury does not have to get into that because they have found Sean Combs not guilty of leading a criminal enterprise, not guilty of racketeering conspiracy. They will now move to the other 4 counts, 2 of them on sex trafficking and on and we have not guilty now on count 2, which was sex trafficking of Cassandra Ventura. Sean Combs has been found not guilty of sex trafficking when it comes to his former girlfriend, Cassie Ventura. There was a real debate that the jury heard over the course of the last 2 months about consent and coercion and the complications of deciding when an 11-year relationship between Combs and Cassie Ventura may have become a criminal one, and the jury decided it was not criminal sex trafficking when Sean Combs committed what his attorneys freely admitted was domestic abuse, as you saw in that video. He has been found not guilty now on racketeering conspiracy, not guilty on sex trafficking of Cassie Ventura. He has been found guilty on count 3, transportation for the purposes of prostitution. He has also been found guilty on count 5, transportation for the purposes of prostitution. These charges carry a maximum penalty of up to 10 years in prison, so we do have a split verdict. Sean Combs has been found not guilty of racketeering conspiracy, not guilty of sex trafficking Cassandra Ventura, but he has been found guilty on 2 counts of transportation for the purposes of prostitution. And we're waiting for one more count, the sex trafficking of Jane. And just now the jury has decided that Sean Combs is not guilty of sex trafficking his former girlfriend who testified under the pseudonym Jane. So the jury has now believed that the relationships that Sean Combs had with his former girlfriends Cassie Ventura and a woman who testified under the pseudonym Jane were not criminal, did not involve sex trafficking. All Sean Combs has been convicted of here is transportation for the purposes of prostitution. And Kira, those did seem to be the most evident crimes that Sean Combs committed. We heard testimony from the male escorts. The jury heard about the cash that they were paid, and as prosecutors told them, they were not in those hotel rooms for scintillating conversation. Sean Combs guilty of transportation for the purposes of prostitution, not guilty of racketeering conspiracy, not guilty of sex trafficking. Kira?
All right, let's put this in perspective now that we know where Sean Combs has been found guilty and non-guilty. Let's put into perspective, Brian, on time he will serve. What are we looking at now with regard to years? Of course, we should point out there will be an appeal. He's got plenty of money to do that. But let's take it from where it stands right now.
Kira, I'm still trying to wrap my mind around this. I'm not even sure if I would say there would be an appeal, because for Sean Combs and his defense team, this is a massive win. 3 of the counts that had a life sentence possibility are gone. When it comes to transportation to engage in prostitution, the minimum is nothing. There's a theoretical possibility that he walks out on probation. Now, do I think that's going to happen? No, but the max is 10 years. Even if you were to take both sentences, and he's not going to get 10 years, they're going to look at his criminal history, mitigating circumstances, aggravating circumstances, and I would assume that he gets somewhere in the middle ground, maybe like 3 to 5 years, 3 to 6 years, possible through that sentencing range for each count. Sean Combs going to trial where he was facing life and being able to walk out with something under 10 years, well under 10 years possibly, that is a victory. Will he appeal? Sure, that's his right to do so, but I don't see an appeal here. I think you take this as a win. You serve the few years that you may get, and you be happy that you didn't get life. I'm somewhat shocked as to the trafficking for Cassie. I thought that might have been a stronger case for the government. I didn't think that they had the RICO, and I definitely didn't think they had the Jane trafficking. But this is, I think in only so many words, and I keep saying it, I think this is a positive result for Sean Combs and his team.
I'm being told now Combs is hugging his lawyer at this very moment. Clearly, he's seeing it as you are seeing it as well. You know, we should point out, Brian, let's look at bigger picture here. He is a music producer. He created a brand around himself. He was a big part of bringing hip hop into the mainstream. There is an entire entertainment business side to this. How do you see, from your experience, this win, as you are saying, for Sean Combs? How will it impact his business empire?
I think, for lack of a better term, there was always going to be a blemish on Sean Combs' career. I think people are going to look at this in 2 different ways. In one way, they're going to say that Sean Combs probably had a history of getting into trouble with the law and somehow getting out from underneath it. They're going to look at past events through both civil and criminal complaints and say, you know what, he's always had good lawyers or whatever it may be, and he's gotten away with bad charges, especially looking at that Intercontinental video. But I think the other view of this is going to be is that he was tried by a jury of his peers. All of the information, the good, the bad, and the ugly, and everything in between was shown to these 12 people, and they did not see the criminal enterprise. They did not see the force, fraud, and coercion. And I think the trafficking to engage in prostitution, I think that's going to be a lighter blemish on his career in terms of the totality of what we saw, as to like, okay, so he paid for people to go across state lines to have consensual sex. And I think consensual sex will be a big part of the conversation based on how the verdict came out. And so do I think he takes a big knock in terms of this case? Yes, but we've seen Sean Combs rebrand and come back from a lot of things, and that is a possibility here.
But let's put it into the context, Aaron Katursky, of the Me Too movement. I don't think anybody can forget the video, the surveillance video that we saw over and over again in that hotel hallway of Sean Combs barely naked in a towel, kicking and dragging Cassie Ventura.
It's an unforgettable piece of video, and it was one of the most visceral pieces of evidence that the jury saw during the course of a nearly 2-month trial, Kira. And the defense really admitted what's depicted on it is domestic violence, but they said all along he's not charged with domestic violence. The defense insisted, even though the defense did not put on much of a case, called no witnesses, that what was depicted was not sex trafficking, and the jury seems to have agreed. And Sean Combs is clearly taking this outcome of a split verdict, guilty on only the transportation for the purposes of prostitution charges, as a win. The jury has been excused. As the 8 men and 4 women stood to leave their seats, Sean Combs made praying hands in their direction and bowed his head slightly as if to say thank you. When the outcome was read aloud in court, Combs put his hands in the air and looked to the ceiling, clearly taking this as a win that he was acquitted on the most serious charges he faced, Kira.
And now I understand, Aaron, his attorneys are calling for him to actually be released today. Could that happen?
Well, it could happen because he has already served about a year's time, a little shy of a year, and there will be a sentencing date. What the defense is likely arguing is that he is now no longer has anything to do with a violent crime. Transportation for the purposes of prostitution carries a maximum sentence of 10 years, a minimum of nothing. So it will be up to the judge to decide. But where he is no longer accused of a violent crime, the defense may have a good case to get him released until he is formally sentenced. If that happens, it's possible he could walk right out the golden doors here. Certainly a number of his supporters and others are waiting. Members of his family were certainly elated. They were not allowed to show any emotion, but they are remaining in the courtroom to see what happens, what the judge ultimately decides, Kira.
Brian, your thoughts on the fact that he could be released today?
So at the beginning of this case, when Sean Combs was charged with sex trafficking, that is a charge that has the assumption that someone should be held pending prosecution. That assumption is gone now because he's been found not guilty of those 2 charges. And to piggyback off what Aaron is saying, the severity of his punishment has greatly decreased. He's no longer looking at life. He's looking at a max of 10 years on each count. Some of that time he's already served while waiting for this case. Mark Ignifilo, the defense attorney who's leading this case, has said that his private plane is in Maui. He has no access to it. So he's hinting at the idea of a number of things that a judge will consider when thinking about bail. Is this person a flight risk? How serious of a sentence are they looking at? And flight risk goes into 2 portions. The actual ability to fly and not come back to the jurisdiction, but also the likelihood of doing that. A person who's facing life, more likely to be a flight risk. A person who's just beaten 3 of the 5 top counts in a trial like this and is only facing 10 years, far less of a flight risk. And so while I think it's somewhat of a Hail Mary for him to be released today, this is the strongest possible outcome that he could have had to make this argument. And I think the defense has a leg to stand on in making this argument that Sean Combs should be released pending the sentence.
Let me ask you, Brian, because you and I were talking for days about the videos. The just how explicit they were, how Sean Combs treated these women, listening to Cassie Ventura break down on the stand, listening to other women, former girlfriends, talk about the way he treated women. I brought this question to Aaron, but I want to ask you as well, as someone who's an attorney, someone who has been in the courtroom for cases that involve domestic violence, knowing what we know about what happened and how he treated these women, and now looking at this outcome, how he's been acquitted on the most serious charges, your overall thoughts moving forward about what this says about the Me Too movement, the power of a music mogul when he has money, when he has fame. Your thoughts?
So my thoughts, I think, I try to go beyond just being an attorney, and I'll try to sidestep them and just talk as a man, as an adult. I think there can be no mixing of words as to what Sean Combs is when it comes to the treatment of women. Full stop, period. There's no question as to what we saw in terms of the strength of the women who took the stand and testified about the abuse that happened to them. There's no question about the photos we saw of Cassie in terms of the bruising of her body, the bruising of her face, and the violence in that Intercontinental Hotel. Full stop. There's no justification of that. There's no explanation of that. And I think in terms of the Me Too movement, there should be strength in the fact that those women were believed in terms of what they said. Putting my attorney hat back on for a moment, I think the difficulty of this and what may be perceived, and I hope it's a perception and not a reality, of the Me Too movement taking a step back based on this verdict, I think it comes from the overreaching of the government in this case, of trying to fit the allegations of this case into a RICO conspiracy, made it that much less palatable for the jury to take what they were saying to be true. And I think that might have also affected, in some way, shape, or form, the trafficking as well. I'll be honest, I'm somewhat shocked that they did not find Sean Combs guilty of trafficking Cassie because of the violence there. But I think that they made a mistake of not understanding the difference between a brutal domestic violence relationship in which Sean Combs participated in and was in many regards an aggressor of, if not the absolute aggressor of, and trafficking. And I think the overreach and misapplication of what 12 people in the Southern District of New York, or what society would believe to be trafficking in RICO, that misstep and misperception is what led the SDNY here. The SDNY has phenomenal prosecutors, has a phenomenal office, and their record speaks for itself. But I think in this case, they overestimated the strength of their case, and this is what happens when a jury speaks.
Aaron, outside court, tell us about who you're seeing. How big of a crowd is it? The sense of the support, if indeed he does walk out of those golden doors, as you said, the type of support he will receive.
Well, out here now, Kira, there are, of course, a number of reporters, a number of bloggers who have been following the trial, curious onlookers, tourists, those in the park across the street doing their morning workout. But everyone is certainly curious whether Sean Combs is going to walk out those golden doors released on bail. His defense attorney, Mark Agnifilo, told the judge a moment ago Combs would be willing to put up $1 million bail to assure that he shows up for his sentencing. Federal prosecutors just opposed his release on bail, saying that he has committed a litany of crimes and there's no reason to believe he would do anything different if he is released now. Federal prosecutors believe Sean Combs still represents a danger and a risk of flight from justice. They point to the physical violence, even though he was not found guilty of sex trafficking nor charged with any physical violence. They say he has shown a predilection to committing physical violence, as the defense readily admitted. So prosecutors are opposing his release on bail. The judge is going to take a moment to decide.
Brian, your thoughts. Is Sean Combs a risk?
So the question is, a risk of what, right? Would I want Sean Combs to be around any girlfriends or women right now? No, because I think the allegations and the facts have shown that he is a toxic individual who could be very violent towards women. But if you're asking me as to whether or not he's a risk to not come back to court to be sentenced, maybe it's my bias as a defense attorney, and looking at this verdict now, I do not believe he's a risk to not come back to court. I think if anything, he is elated, he is happy, he's excited to come back to court to formulate the best argument for sentencing. And yes, he might spend some years in prison, but the amount of time that he would spend is far less than if he fled and never came back. And he has children here. He has enterprises here. He has at least 60 civil lawsuits that he has to fight. He has, in my mind, and maybe I'm making too strong of an application as a defense attorney, he has far more reasons to stay here and fight now after this verdict than to flee and never come back. And so, do I think he's going to get released? Probably not. That's a high bar to overcome, and I don't think the judge will allow that. But I think there is a very valid and strong argument that he is not a flight risk, and I think there's a possibility, albeit very small, that he walks out of those golden doors.
And Aaron, from what I understand, the judge has now said he is going to take his time to consider if indeed Sean Combs will be released today or not.
He will give a decision today, Kira, but the government and defense attorneys are asking for a period of hours so they can write letters, make their arguments on both sides. So it could be quite a while before the judge decides whether Sean Combs deserves to be released on bail. The government is making the case that he still faces, up after his conviction on the 2 transportation for the purposes of prostitution charges, but the jury has cleared him of the most serious charges of sex trafficking and racketeering conspiracy that could have sent him to prison for life.
Brian, how do you think, what was it that defense lawyers did? What was it that they said? What was it that they had that you think helped deliver a victory for their client?
I think the case against Sean Combs was the first time, at least in me covering the Harvey Weinstein trial, where I was sitting in court, the R. Kelly trial, where I was sitting in court, and many of the cases that I think we would associate with the Me Too movement, where the defense was willing to say, my client is indefensible in some of his actions, that what he did and what you saw is wrong, but making the very strong distinction and walking the very tightrope of saying what he did wrong and what he's being accused of are 2 different things. What we've seen of people in the past of saying, well, they're all lying, you can't trust these women, you can't believe them. I think that's not a way to handle these cases. And I think what the defense did well is in talking to the human aspect of these are very messy relationships, that Sean Combs is an abuser. And Mark Agnifilo said it himself. If Sean Combs was accused of domestic violence, there would not be a trial because he would plead guilty. Do I think that's a bit of showmanship? Yes. Do I think that would actually be true? Maybe, maybe not. But I think arguing it nonetheless in front of a jury and admitting to some of the bad facts and trying to parse through it all, I think it gave them credibility to get to this verdict.
Let's bring in our Bernarda Villalona, who's been also with us as an attorney, as a contributor here at ABC News. You and I have been talking every day for months now about this case. Bernarda, I asked Brian this question as an attorney who has been involved with domestic violence cases. I want to ask you as well your thoughts on what this means for the victims.
For the victims, I think this is a slap in the face for the victims. I think this is going to deter victims from coming forward and telling their story and being the voice for the voiceless in the sense of representing other victims that are not willing to come forward. I know that for a fact, I'm sure that the prosecution right now is very upset with this verdict because they definitely put a lot of time into this prosecution, into this investigation. And they also did a lot of comforting of trying to give strength to these women, to Jane and to Cassie, to come forward, to show their face, to share their story. And this is not just like any other regular domestic violence case or just any type of abuse case. You're dealing that they were stepping forward to speak against a music mogul, a person who had the key to New York City, one of the most powerful people in the industry. So just think of how scared they were to come forward and to tell their story, and scared of what could happen once they came forward. Because I'm sure with social media and people talking in the news that they have received a lot of threats and people commenting about who they are and what they've done and that they are liars. But they, and they alone, know what happened to them. And they had prosecutors that believed in them and believed their story and became their voice.
Aaron, I understand court has now been adjourned. Combs was escorted out. A massive applause was heard from within the courtroom.
The judge said court is adjourned for now, Kira. He's going to give the parties until 1 p.m. Eastern time to submit letters arguing for or against his release on bail. The judge left the bench until later on this afternoon when he'll give his decision. Once the judge was off the bench, Sean Combs was escorted out by the marshals. The judge told him he's going to have to cool his heels in the courthouse for a bit. But as he left the courtroom, there were applause from the gallery, some cheers in the gallery where members of his family have been in steadfast vigil. His mother here most days, his twin daughters back, his sons have been here most days. They cheered for their father after he was acquitted of the most serious charges that he faces, still convicted of transportation for the purposes of prostitution. And now we await the decision as to whether he's going to be released on bail. If he is, he will walk out to a crowd that includes people holding up Sean John T-shirts and other supporters who have been here saying, "Where's the Rico?" They've been shouting that into the street for weeks, and they would certainly welcome this verdict if he is to walk out those golden doors, Kira. For the jury, they really had to make a difficult decision, not just on the racketeering conspiracy, but as the defense said, the women that Combs was accused of trafficking were also his long-term girlfriends. Cassie Ventura with him for 11 years, Jane with him for more than 3 years. And the defense tried to argue that they were consensual relationships, that they were in it just as much as he was because that was their lifestyle, even though they freely admitted the polyamorous swingers kink was not everybody's cup of tea. But he said these women were in it, and it required the jury to make distinctions between consent and coercion and love and control and free will. And in the end, they acquit on the most serious charges that carried a minimum sentence of 15 years, acquitting on sex trafficking in addition to the racketeering conspiracy, Kira.
Bernard, I want to bring you back in on that. As Aaron was saying, this really came down to violence and fear versus love, infidelity, and jealousy. We are watching the doors now to see if lawyers will be coming out and coming to the mics. But Bernarda, Sean Combs may be acquitted of the most serious charges here. But let's talk about the impact all of this will have on ongoing civil cases.
Yes, so you have to think, so even though he was acquitted of the most serious charge in this criminal case, when we're talking about a civil case, it's a different burden. The criminal case is beyond a reasonable doubt. When you're dealing with civil cases, it's by preponderance of the evidence, 51% versus 49%. But then again, with a civil case, he's just at risk of losing his empire in terms of money, but his liberty is no longer at stake. So he can live to fight those cases outside of jail bars.
You bring up a good point, because if he would have been found guilty of racketeering, that could have forced him to forfeit all his businesses, right?
Absolutely. So if he would have been found guilty of racketeering conspiracy and of the sex trafficking, anything that was used in order to facilitate this crime. So for example, his mansions in Florida and his mansion in Los Angeles would have been at risk that it would have been taken away from the government, since there was evidence that was put forth having to deal with that some of the sex trafficking took place inside of those homes. So he would have been at risk of losing that, and also a lot of his businesses and his money.
In his closing argument, one of Combs' defense attorneys asked jurors to summon the courage to acquit Combs, who conceded he could be violent, jealous, and a drug user, but whose lawyers argued the case is badly, badly exaggerated to make Combs like something he is not. Do you think that's what happened, Brian Buckmeyer?
I think, I don't know. This one I'm still trying to wrap my mind around, and I apologize. I'm trying to get information from different people as I go about this, trying to get information from people inside the court. I think, let me try to put it into words. I think when it comes to this case, this might have been more about how the case was handled than the actual people who testified. I could see how this might be an indictment on the women who testified, and I would say, as someone who watched them, I don't think it should be. I think, if anything, this is about how the case was handled by the government in terms of how they argued it, how they presented it, and the people that were selected. People being selected being the jurors, not the team themselves. And so I think as we move forward with this case and we see what's going to happen, because there is a possibility, although small, that Sean Combs walks out today, I think we just take stock of what we heard, what was argued, and what the result was, and not lay this at the feet of anyone who testified.
And now I understand, Aaron, a statement has been given on behalf of Cassie Ventura, star witness in this case. What are you learning?
Her attorney, Doug Wigdor, just sent us the following statement. This entire criminal process started when our client, Cassie Ventura, had the courage to file her civil complaint in November 2023. And Kira, we should say that's true. The criminal investigation is largely based on the statements in Cassie Ventura's lawsuit, and intensified, of course, once video from the 2016 hotel security camera became public. The statement from Doug Wigdor, her attorney, goes on to say, although the jury did not find Combs guilty of sex trafficking Cassie beyond a reasonable doubt, she paved the way for a jury to find him guilty of transportation to engage in prostitution. By coming forward with her experience, Cassie's attorney, Doug Wigdor, goes on to say, Cassie has left an indelible mark on both the entertainment industry and the fight for justice. We must repeat with no reservation that we believe and support our client, who showed exemplary courage throughout this trial. She testified for 4 days, often quite emotionally so, giving graphic, explicit detail of what she said she was made to do. And Sean Combs did not deny the facts of the freak-offs. Everything that happened in those hotel rooms did not get challenged by the defense. The defense simply saw it differently, as something that went on in a personal, consensual relationship, not sex trafficking. And that's how the outcome is reflected now, Kira.
Bernard, I want to go on to read another part of that statement on behalf of Cassie Ventura's attorney, saying she displayed unquestionable strength and brought attention to the realities of powerful men in our orbit and the misconduct that has persisted for decades without repercussion. This case proved that change is long overdue, and we will continue to fight on behalf of survivors. Two things that stood out to me: powerful men in our orbit and the misconduct that persists, and change that is long overdue. Your thoughts?
Power and money. You can buy yourself out of a conviction. Let's be honest that if Sean Combs wasn't able to get the team that he got and pay for that defense team and experts and investigators to help defend himself, that we would have had a different outcome today. But money and power, that you can still get away with crimes if you have money and power. But I have to say, I was in the courtroom for Cassie's testimony, and she was a strong, strong witness. You can tell that the courage that she had, the strength that she exhibited. I mean, when she spoke and when she would cry from time to time, when she revisited those freak-offs and when she revisited those times where Sean Combs brutally beat her, and to see her in court sitting down, showing the strength and courage that she was able to overcome this. I think one of the most strongest moments that brought people to tears is when she said at some point that she went home and she told her husband, "You can do this without me," and that she wanted to cross the street and commit suicide because of what she had been through. But I'm glad that Cassie has been able to pick herself up and has been able to move on, taking it day by day, because it does show the strength that she got as a result of coming forward. That coming forward helped to bring closure to her.
Bernarda, thank you. Aaron, getting more insight from Sean Combs inside that courtroom, saying this coming from journalists in the press room. He was overcome with emotion as the verdict was read. His feet were visibly shaking throughout the reading of the verdict.
He has been an emotional defendant throughout the entire case. In fact, at one point, the judge had to admonish his attorney that Combs was gesturing and trying to make eyes with jurors as if to attempt to influence them when they were hearing certain testimony. And the judge made him sit straight and silent throughout much of the testimony. But as the verdict was being read, he started gesturing. He got down on the floor after it was over to kneel in prayer. Applause broke out into the courtroom. And I'm struck, Kira, the crowd has gathered here outside. And in the windows of the upper floors, courthouse employees are peering down to look at the streetscape below as more people rush toward these doors in anticipation of a possible release on bail sometime later on today, Kira.
And as we wait to hear what the outcome of that is, of course, if indeed the judge decides he could be released today. Brian Buckmeyer, let's talk about the jury makeup here and how it influenced this case, you think. We talked about the fact that it was 8 men, 4 women. Your thoughts on the number of men in this case versus women and how you see that influencing what happened here?
Yes, I know oftentimes when we look at jurors, we look at race or gender. And yes, there's a possibility that the number of men in this case could have been beneficial to Sean Combs in terms of trying to decide what this relationship was like. But I think probably more importantly than race or gender would be age. And the reason why I say that is because when it comes to the conversation as to whether or not these were consensual relationships, which appears to be at the heart of the jury's verdict in terms of saying, yes, we saw that you brought these people across state lines for prostitution, but we don't believe there was force, fraud, or coercion for trafficking, and we don't believe that there was a criminal enterprise or that there was not 2 predicate acts, right? I think a large part of the not believing comes down to consent. And what I find, at least when I talk to a jury or just talk to people in general, is there's a big divide in terms of what is consent when you talk to someone who is over the age of 40 or 45 and under the age of 40 or 45. And when you have a jury where more than half of them are 51 years to 74 years old, and even if you go even below that, there's a number of people who are in their 40s, I think the conversation and the argument that Mark Agnifilo and his team were having about what it means to consent works for people in that age demographic. I think if we had a jury that was predominantly in their 20s or early 30s, this argument of consent would be very different. So while I do see that there is value in looking at the gender or the sex of the jurors, I think the age told us a lot more based on the arguments we saw.
Bernarda, you think it was smart that Sean Combs did not take the stand?
Absolutely, absolutely. If Sean Combs would have taken the stand, this case would have become a deliberation of whether this jury believed what Sean Combs had to say, whether his demeanor came off as one as credible. Also, you have to think where if Sean Combs were to testify, there was a lot of evidence that the prosecution was not able to get in their case in chief because they were missing a link, and that link would have been Sean Combs. So they would have been able to get that evidence in had Sean Combs testified. So it would have changed the deliberation process, and we would have probably been looking at a completely different verdict. Also got to think, how would he be able to explain in terms of the brutal beating of Cassie and of Jane on that particular occasion?
Aaron, do you think we'll hear from the family? Sean Combs' mother, Janice, was in the courtroom along with his sons, his daughters. Are they expected to speak? Do you think they will speak?
I'm not sure. They haven't yet during the course of this trial, but the cars that they've been using to transport themselves to and from the courthouse are now pulling up to the front here, and they should be walking out those golden doors any moment. They may opt to wait until they know whether Combs is going to get released on bail, as his defense attorney argued he should be. And Combs almost seemed confident that the judge would grant it. He mouthed and said aloud to members of his family in the gallery, "I'm coming home, baby," after the split verdict here, acquitting him of the most serious charges, but finding him guilty of transportation for the purposes of prostitution. And because that is not a violent crime, the defense said that he has earned the right to get released on $1 million bail, as Combs offered to put up.
Aaron, we talk about the support outside of the courthouse there, the cheers that were heard from inside the courtroom. We should point out it's because he had his mom and his kids inside that courtroom. But if you want to talk about people showing up to support Sean Combs throughout all of this, the only celebrity that we witnessed, and correct me if I'm wrong, that came to show support was Kanye West.
That's right, and what a moment that was. The family now is coming out. You can see the mother of Sean Combs waving and giving a thumbs up. His sons walking out as well. Twin daughters. You can hear perhaps the cheers from some of the supporters, if you can hear them over the hum of the traffic. There were supporters in the courtroom throughout, a few outside, but only Kanye West showed up to court. And when he walked in his all-white suit, he said he was here to support Sean Combs, but he never saw him. He was not allowed inside the courtroom itself. He watched about 10 minutes of the proceedings inside an overflow room and was in and out of the courthouse in about 20 minutes, and we're not sure whether he was invited or not, or showed up of his own volition. There really haven't been that many supporters, apart from his family, that just left court, as you can see, waving and giving a thumbs up moments ago. Sean Combs has been largely left alone with members of his family, including the mother of at least one of his children. His twin daughters were here at the beginning. They came at the end. His sons were here throughout the case, as was his mother. And when the jury came back stuck yesterday, Combs turned to his mother and said, "It's going to be okay." And today, after the outcome, he turned to his family and said, "I'm coming home, baby."
Bernardo, let me pull something out of what Aaron just said. Sean Combs was largely left alone through all of this. We're talking about somebody that was a huge businessman, a music mogul, a producer, a huge part of making hip hop mainstream. He threw these lavish parties. He was always pointed to at big events and galas. The fact that Aaron said he was largely left alone, what does that tell you?
And he was. I was in a courtroom for the entire trial with the exception of one day. And literally the only person who showed up was Kanye. And the jury didn't get to see Kanye because he was in an overflow room. But in terms of being left alone, Kira, are you surprised? When you look at that video, the Intercontinental video, there's no running from it. And artists and celebrities, they wanted to run away from that because they didn't want to be associated with that type of violence. So it came down to money.
Bernardo, thank you. Aaron, want to take it to you as we reach the top of the hour here. We now wait to see if indeed the judge makes a decision. He says he will make it today, if he will allow Sean Combs to be released and walk out those doors behind you.
The judge gave them several hours to make written arguments before he issues a decision on release on bail. But Sean Combs is already celebrating after he was acquitted of the most serious charges that he faced that could have sent him to prison for life. He was convicted of transporting people for the purposes of prostitution, but taking that as a win, even though in theory he still faces up to 20 years in prison, Kira.
And acquitted of the most serious charges. Bernardo, Brian, Aaron, thank you. We're going to return you now to your regular programming. For some of you, that is Good Morning America. But I do want to tell you about an ABC News special verdict, the Diddy trial, that will air tonight, 10 Eastern. Our coverage continues on ABC News Live and abcnews.com. The entire team will be here for World News Tonight with David Muir. I'm Kira Phillips. Thanks for staying with us.
Okay, that brings to end the first video. That's the end of our first video there. Let me check the next one. That's the first video. Let's look at the second video from TMZ. Let's look at the TMZ video and look at. This is it.
Welcome to TMZ Live. Harvey Levin here.
Charles here.
So I have to say, yesterday was one of the most extraordinary days we have had in the whole 20-year history of TMZ.
There really hasn't been a trial and a verdict like Diddy's in the existence of TMZ.
There really
was before OJ was before TMZ existed, and it was very different in the office.
Well, and it was such a mysterious kind of deliberation where everybody was guessing, and a lot of us, myself included, guessing wrong. And we watched this whole thing unfold and had to organize a lot of moving parts as all of this was happening. And
trying to put together all the shows, get everything up on the website.
And understand what was going on.
Right.
So the
analysis of it as it came in.
We shot all of this from start to finish, and we thought we'd give you a look at how all of that unfolded here as we were breaking stories, as we were putting stories up, as we were organizing all the various things we have to do here.
It's kind of like The Office, but it's the newsroom.
It is the newsroom.
Right.
Du weißt, dass man online Geld verdienen kann. Du siehst all diese Online-Millionäre, fragst dich aber, wie du damit starten kannst. Und warte, keine Sorge, ich möchte jetzt nicht wie jeder andere Guru hier irgendeinen Kurs an.
Hey, Brian. Hey, we think it's a verdict. We know it's a note.
Wait a minute, why do you think it's a verdict?
Because Ed Friedland, the head of the court system, is in the room, and I said, is it a verdict to him? And he nodded his head, so I left the courtroom and I left.
CNN saying it's a verdict.
Okay, CNN is saying it's a verdict as well.
Did they say, are the lawyers there?
Yes, everybody's in the court. I saw everybody in but Nicole Westmoreland. She was coming into the elevators. I was going down to the elevator.
Is Diddy in the courtroom?
Diddy is not in the courtroom. When I left, he was in the lockup, but there were a bunch of people who went back to talk to him. It was Nick Niffolo, it was Acevedo, and it was Kenny. They were back. The marshals pulled up with me when I left the courtroom.
So, did the judge give any indication on how long before they read it?
No, the judge is not on the bench. Typically, there's been about a 10 to 15 minute lag time before the judge comes in after the notification is given.
Are you able to hear this?
Yes.
How long, when did the jury start? Do you know when they started deliberating today?
They came in at 8, they were told to be here at 8:45 to go straight to the room to begin their deliberations at 9. I did not see them because I was in another part of the security going through the building. But that's
so most they could have deliberated was an hour?
Most likely, yes.
Okay, where are you right now?
I'm on the rear side where we're going to wait for the jurors to come out, and when you and I hang up, I'll get on the Zoom with you.
But wait a minute, you're not, wait a minute, are you going to be in the courtroom when they read it? Oh, Jacob's in the courtroom.
Wasserman's in the courtroom. I'm standing by to get the jurors when they come out because we think it's going to happen super fast. So I can't be in two places at once.
Just had to be.
So they have a verdict, right?
Yeah.
Right. So this is not a.
It's not a hung jury.
Them coming back to say that.
They said they have a verdict.
Steve, we'll hang up for an hour. All right. I'm bumping all our day preps up.
So this split was 10-2.
I think it was 11-1. I think that's.
No, they said.
I know, but I think that was just sloppy.
What was that, Pro?
I honestly do.
I don't think they were sloppy. They said we.
Or to throw off the same.
But it was. You know what I was thinking? Honestly,
I think it's 11-1.
You know,
and that guy slept on it.
Somebody at my gym came up to me today and started asking me about it. And as we started talking, it was like.
Are you tired of your YouTube channel not getting the attention it deserves? Building a YouTube channel can be a very lucrative and successful way to make new fans or sell your product or service. But without the proper YouTube promotion, your channel might just get likes from your mom. Thanks, Mom. And buying views, using bots to grow views or subscriber counts is so 2020. That's why we created Sprizzy. Sprizzy is a simple platform that creates effective YouTube ads that quickly find new subscribers without any Google Ads experience. Since 2016, we've helped thousands of creators just like you grow their subscriber base through our proven process. Let me show you how it works. Start by logging into Sprizzy and entering a few basic details about your video, like relevant keywords, your target audience, budget, and any similar channels or videos.
I think that there are, because if they found him guilty on the Mann Act, which I think they did, right? And they must have, because 10 people said there were 2 crimes. And unless the crimes were unrelated, like arson and burglary.
Bribery. Drugs are the easy one. They asked the question about drugs during distribution. Now we know that one. And it looked like they had gotten far enough down the predicate act to get to drugs.
But there were probably people who just said, this just isn't racketeering. And at some point, they probably came in today and said, look, you got to follow the jury instructions. And the jury instructions say, whether you like it or not, they say, you got to find them guilty if they have 2 predicate acts.
And of course, the old
holidays coming up. And the holidays.
We gotta go. We just gotta wrap this up. We already got the day off work, so.
Yeah, but I mean that's not fair to the jury. I mean,
it's not. But I think it's fair to human nature.
I think that there must have been some people who took a stand, thought it was going to be a hung jury, and now that the judge said go back in, the judge, these 2 jurors or however many, they're saying, okay, look, we can't do that.
Why they got 10 angry people looking at them. That's why judges insist on we're not going to give up early. Go back in and deliberate. He wants to. They want a verdict.
Hey, Reagan.
Thursday, he won't accept that.
Can you have Olivia call Garagos and see if they can do if he'll do the Tubi show after the verdict? I know, but Garagos doesn't know, so somebody's got to call him.
This one.
I'm sure it was he has a gag order. He's gagged on this.
Yeah,
well, you know why he's gagged? Because his daughter said, "Don't you dare talk to him."
Oh, right. Because of your podcast. Oh, it's a daughter gag order, not necessarily a judge gag order.
He literally called it a DV order to me. Yeah, no, he hasn't been able to talk about it, but he's going to now.
Good.
He's got it now. And he's got stuff to say.
Guys. Jury note says we have reached a verdict on all counts. This is the only update we have.
All counts?
Okay, all counts.
I think
is he in the courtroom right now?
Yes, he's there. Right. He's sitting in a chair with his head down and eyeglasses on.
I don't think Kevin mentioned the color. Yeah, he knows.
You can wear that color in a beautiful three-piece suit.
I mean, I stopped guessing with OJ, but that's why I didn't wear it. Because they railed on that first juror an hour after they started.
Der Lochfilm ist eingeschlagen wie eine Bombe.
Seitdem wir die beiden Lochfilme jetzt im Einsatz haben, konnten wir über 1 Million Euro.
There's a very good chance he's guilty on all counts. Oh, and I think that's going to be what happens. Because why else would they have railed on that one juror an hour in saying he won't make a decision?
The judge cautioned everyone in the courtroom to maintain order.
Is the jury in?
No, jury's in.
Okay, so the jury's in. So what they'll do, I mean, what they typically do is the foreman hands it to the clerk then hands it to the judge reviews it.
Did he standing up? Jurors enter.
Okay, here we go. Judgment time. Here we go.
He's been 6 to 12.
I still need 3 more stories.
This is like 8 stories.
We're going to be delayed on getting the show ready.
I will delay myself for this.
Judge, we have received your note. Juror number 5, have you reached a verdict? We have. Is it unanimous? It is. Please provide the verdict to the deputy.
In a hush.
I know. They've reached a unanimous verdict.
So what, he handed it to the deputy hands it to the judge is reviewing the verdict. I'm not sure whether he's going to ask the foreman to read it or
the foreman will now read the verdict.
There you go. Here we go. This is it.
What we've all been waiting
Will that automatically refresh?
This automatically refresh, and I think they're going faster than this keeps crashing because there's so many people.
You're doing both?
I'll keep an eye on the scene, and can you keep an eye on Inner City? Reading the verdict. Is Brian outside?
Brian's outside. Jacobs.
Might be able to even like.
Jacobson. Do you have Brian on Zoom?
He might be able to like hear like cheers. Or
Is Brian hearing
Be
anything?
able to like tell us quicker than.
I know, but there might.
You know what I mean? Okay. No, please. Okay, the deputy will inquire to the verdict. In the matter of U.S. versus Combs, count 1, not guilty. Sex trafficking of Cassie Ventura, not guilty. Transportation of prostitution, guilty. So count 1, 2.
This show is a great opportunity to network.
Welcome back to Team Z Live. If you're just joining us, we are giving you a look inside our newsroom when the Diddy verdict came down. So what you're about to see is the moment it comes in and our on-the-spot analysis of what the jury's decision means.
Okay, the deputy will inquire to the verdict. In the matter of U.S. versus Combs, count 1, not guilty. Sex trafficking of Cassie Ventura, not guilty. Transportation of prostitution, guilty. So count 1, 2, not guilty.
Wow.
Mann Act, guilty.
Wow.
All right, so that's sex trafficking, no. Count 1, no. Count 3, yes. Mann Act, Cassie.
And,
now we have
count
Jane.
3 is Mann Act Cassie.
Correct. Now we have Jane for the sex trafficking and the Mann Act left. No. Oh my God.
If they say yes on Jane,
If they said not guilty for Cassie, then
It's just going to be the Mann Acts.
we got to see what they're doing. What did they say on 1?
Not guilty.
Oh, Guilty on Rico.
Racketeering,
So
not guilty.
Not guilty.
Not guilty on Rico. It's only the sex trafficking of Cassie, not guilty. Transportation of prostitution for Cassie, guilty. So now we just have Jane sex trafficking and sorry, I'm yelling. Jane sex trafficking and Jane Mann Act.
Sex trafficking, not guilty. Transportation of prostitution, Jane, guilty.
Wow, so 2 of the Mann Acts. 2 Mann Acts and that's it.
Up to 20.
But, you know what? But that may be concurrent, and the prosecution.
Well, it's 2 separate acts. It wouldn't be.
This is
Oh my
even though he's found guilty, this is a loss for prosecutors.
Yeah.
I mean, their whole point was Diddy was a racketeer who forced them into sex. The jury said no.
This entire case now is just a simple prostitution case.
It's a prostitution case, which is
a prostitution case that he faces up to 20 years for. No, we got that, but just the fact he brought it across state lines is the only thing different than.
And by the way,
I agree. It was the easiest count, and this is a loss for the.
They never. If this were just a Mann Act, they never would have prosecuted him. They prosecuted him on racketeering and on sex trafficking, and they lost.
But I think the judge will throw the book at him on the 2 counts.
Your users love your platform, but when it's time to build their website, they look elsewhere. Do you see the opportunity? New revenue, happier users. But building a website builder.
Because that's all they got him on, and he's been depicted as so monstrous during this trial that the judge in second scene. He did, but they found him guilty on the Mann Act. I think he might give him.
Well, and by the way, by finding him guilty on the Mann Act, they could have technically found him guilty on racketeering, but they didn't.
You're not
well, no, because you needed sex trafficking also.
Right.
No, because you could have 2 separate things.
No, but they'd have to be 2 different predicate acts.
Right, but the predicate acts for the Mann Act were still 2 different crimes.
I think that should be 2
No, it's
separate,
1 crime, 2 separate.
2 types of
Right.
predicate acts.
Yeah.
Not 2 Mann Acts. I think you had to.
There were plenty of things the jury could have found. They decided.
They did. Presumably, not kid cutting, not kidnapping.
Well, not 2
Because
of
if
them.
they would have found a second, they could have found him guilty on racketeering.
They only found Mann Acts, and they didn't have enough for Rico.
Wow.
How?
Wow. Wow.
Expect that?
I mean,
how did you listen to that Cassie testimony
And not
wow.
anything.
So here's, I mean, they said it's an 11-year relationship.
It doesn't matter.
There were times where she said she wanted to.
But they were
I know.
The time she said yes didn't negate the time she said no.
That's the instruction.
No.
But there's
no.
She said no sometimes.
No, but what I was thinking of, when you listen to the testimony, she was saying, I didn't want to do it. She didn't say to him, no.
She did say no to him on her 29th birthday.
Yes, she
Daniel
did.
testified
She said,
that
no,
he beat her up and walked out of the room and said,
And
continue
then
the free call.
No.
But then he threatened her.
Yeah, that's
exactly.
what
Threatened her.
I understand that, but they didn't believe.
They didn't.
They didn't.
They didn't believe it.
Guys, we have seen time and time again how difficult it is to get a conviction of a famous, wealthy person. Over and over again.
I mean,
It's
Harvey
just-
Weinstein got convicted, Bill Cosby got
There
convicted.
you go. So, hold on. There are exceptions, but we also have Robert Blake and O.J. Simpson, and the list goes on.
Yeah, but I can
and
explain.
on.
I can explain O.J. Simpson, and it has nothing to do with celebrity. It has to do with Rodney King. It has to do with Rodney King. That's what it has to do. I covered it.
I know you covered it, but
I'm telling you.
But the understanding in the world at the time, everybody thought he was guilty. There's a lot of people who said
I covered the trial, and I know what happened.
Back to this trial.
Hold on, does he
What
just
happened
walk
is there
out
were
today?
too many times that Jane and Cassie
yes.
said yes. Said not only said yes, but said they requested
But then
specifically
that's
for
jury
the women to have
nullification
the
of the
recall.
times that they said no.
In weniger als 24 Stunden werden sie 1.000 Euro auf ihrem Konto haben und danach 1.000 Euro täglich für ihr Leben.
What about the Kid Cudi case?
They don't believe it was him.
They don't. They just don't believe. I know. What about the kidnapping of Capricorn?
She got destroyed on the cross.
So
They
what
said
I'm
she was
saying
taken
is
home every day.
they
It wasn't
couldn't.
kidnapping.
They just couldn't. They didn't believe that because had they believed it, there would have been 2 acts.
Not to question jurors about the deliberations. Jurors, you can contact your chambers. You gave up a lot these 10 weeks. It's inspiring. You work together, rain or shine. You answered the call of public service. That should give us hope.
Okay, I'm going to just say something now. It's great that the judge advised them, and if they want to take the judge's advice, that's fine. But the judge cannot stop the media from going to this jury and asking them questions that, I'm sorry. The judge can say that. I ask the media, why? I mean, why? The jury is excused. The media, any juror can say no, but there should be no problem with the media, anybody in the media, approaching an excused juror and saying, could we talk to you? And if they say no, fine. But I'm sorry. I've heard enough of judges saying to the media, don't talk. Why? Why? The jurors can say no if they want.
Fair point.
So I'm sorry about that. That's just wrong.
So let's go get him.
Well, we're gonna try, and everybody else is gonna try. Everybody wants to know, especially now. Especially now. I mean, look, Diddy got convicted on 2 serious felony counts that could land him in prison. I don't think he's going to get the maximum. He's a first-time offender. And you have to look at the overlay here, which is they found him not guilty on the main counts that caused the prosecutors to file this case in the first place. So I don't think he's going to get anywhere near the maximum. But whichever way you look at it, whether he spends 5 years in prison, which will...
Hey, Harvey, Agnifilo just said Diddy should be released to the judge.
Until sentencing.
Until sentencing.
Well, that's interesting because they don't believe he was...
Why? The analysis hasn't changed on his danger.
Yes, it has. It has. No, he was found not guilty, Derek. He was found not guilty. If he were guilty of coercion or force or racketeering, yes, he should be held without bail.
Society is not at risk from somebody who just simply sleeps with prostitutes. It's just not a risk.
That's not what he's guilty of, not sleeping.
No,
He's guilty of putting one on a plane going from one state to another.
That's illegal.
It's illegal, but it's not a risk. It's not a risk where you keep somebody in pending appeal.
So how much jail time are we looking at?
I don't know. We don't know.
It's 10 years for
So, hold on, guys. This is huge that the judge is going to have to make a decision now on bail.
That's a bail question. You're asking for
This is, guys, this is huge. Whether if the judge, it's huge.
So what, he would just be out until the sentence?
Yeah, he could be out pending sentencing.
Yeah.
Honestly,
it's a fair ask. I don't know that he'll let
That would be a hell of a last freak off.
This is going to show the judge's feelings on his
Agnifilo was making
dangerousness.
the argument about
you can't.
how he should be released.
The analysis is what I don't
The
think.
same thing that he was saying at the bail.
The jury said no.
He's not convicted of a crime that would typically hold over somebody. In Maui.
Es ist an der Zeit, sich von alten Gewohnheiten zu verabschieden. Mit der intuitiven Arbeitsmanagement-Plattform von Monday.com.
He does not have access to his plane. This is his first conviction, and it is a prostitution offense. He should be released.
Yeah, I mean, that's a compelling, that is a compelling argument.
They would never hold over somebody just on
a Mann Act. They would never.
They
would never.
But it's not the same analysis as the verdict. It just isn't. It's an analysis of
He was
dangerousness and flight
found
risk.
not guilty.
He is found. No, he is found guilty of crimes. He's going to be sentenced. Hold on. Now I think about this. Is he a flight risk? Yes, he's still hugely wealthy, and he's been convicted of a crime.
That's why he says he doesn't have access to a plane. They still have his passport. He probably is not a flight risk at this point.
I don't know that you can say that. He's one of the wealthiest.
Not everybody who's
Because you're wealthy doesn't mean you stay in prison.
His family is here and could sign a bond. He should be released today to go back and live at Two-Star Island. The judge says this is coming up right now. I will hear from the government in a moment. Are you proposing he just walk outside now? Yes.
Holy crap. No, I know. I don't see how the if the judge says we're going to hold him without bail on a prostitution charge, no way. Can I tell you something? The government got its ass kicked here. They got their ass kicked. They never would have filed a Mann Act case against him. This case was filed because of Cassie's lawsuit. And remember, the U.S. attorney gets up and he talks about baby oil and Astroglide and all this other stuff. The jury bought Agnifilo's argument that this was, ooh, you got Astroglide off the street. They lost. This was a huge loss.
Turn it into just a game, right? Did he?
Well, it was a game.
But Diddy did some monstrous things.
Yes.
You can't fault the prosecution. And the prosecution put on a really good case. I'm not faulting the jury, but it's like these things happen, and it was worth the risk for the government, right? He's a kind of a monster.
Well, now, yes.
Is he a federal crime monster?
No. Apparently not, according to the jury.
We saw the Intercontinental video.
Yes.
That's enough to say yes.
Right.
That's enough to say yes.
But it's not enough.
But he wasn't prosecuted for that.
I got it. They didn't misdo anything.
This should have been a domestic violence case in state court.
The feds can only charge with what they can charge.
In state court.
They didn't have the statute of limitations.
No, I understand. Because they should not have brought the case.
We're going to take a break. When we come back, we're going to show you more of how all of this unfolded and what it all means.
Right, but first, Nancy Grace. She is going to be here to talk about the impact going forward in the legal system after the Diddy verdict.
She is upset and outraged.
That's an understatement.
Okay, let me end this. Guys, we end our episode here. We're going to end this episode here. Stop sharing my screen. So guys, that's it for today on the Diddy trial verdict. He's been held not guilty for racketeering conspiracy, not guilty of sex trafficking. He was guilty of transportation to engage in prostitution on 2 counts. So that's it. We look forward to see you on next Saturday or next weekend. Thank you. Please share, please comment, please subscribe. Please support us by making comment, liking the video, commenting on the video, sharing the video. That's how you support us. That's the only thing we ask you of. Please. Bye. See you next weekend. I'm ending this stream here on 1, 2, 3.